Hello everyone and welcome to today's New South Wales Tourism Awards webinar. For technical assistance, please phone Redback Support on 1800 733 416. We are pleased to welcome our presenter for today, Natalie Bramble. This webinar is live and interactive. You're encouraged to participate by posting questions to Natalie, which can be typed into the chat box at the bottom left-hand side of your screen. All questions will be answered throughout and at the end of the presentation. I'd now like to pass you over to Natalie to begin.
Good morning. Welcome everyone to the New South Wales Tourism Awards webinar. Wonderful to have you all here with us today. Just to let you know, the frame for today is that we do have two webinars, and the first webinar we're going to be talking about changes to the awards program, some key dates and our wonderful mentoring support. And then the second part of the webinar, starting at 12 o'clock, we'll be writing tips and tricks. So before we get started, as you know, my name's Natalie Bramble. Just to give you a little bit of my background, I have run a heritage tourist attraction. I've sat on the New South Wales Tourism Judging Awards panel now for, well, this will be the 10th year, and I'm also a judge for the tourism, Vanuatu tourism. So I am going to share with you a lot of things that the judges are looking for, particularly in the second part of the webinar, which comes from obviously all of our judges and their feedback. So what we're looking at, first of all, this morning, you can see up on your screen, these are the things that we will be going through: the awards program, the key dates, what is new, rules of entry, the entry process, and of course judging. And if you have any questions as I'm going through the webinar, please do ask them, and I will address those questions relevant to the slides as I'm progressing through. The second part of the webinar, starting at 12 o'clock, we'll be talking about the submission, and we're actually going to look at a sample series of questions, and we're going to talk to those questions and give you some tips on how to address them, etc. And we're also going to be talking about where you can obtain some ongoing support with our wonderful Heidi, who's in the office, ready to help you with your any awards queries. All right, let's get started. I'm sure many of you know the value that tourism has, particularly to our gross domestic product, and particularly in New South Wales. It is a very large sector, and we want to make sure that we're celebrating best practice, and these awards programs are certainly looking at celebrating our wonderful operators out there who are doing some wonderful things. Our awards program that we have a range of states, obviously, that run their own awards program. And the Australian Tourism Industry Council is the owner of the Tourism Awards and oversees the governance of the program in some of the categories. So New South Wales does actually have some specific award categories just for New South Wales only, and I'll talk about those a little later. But otherwise, award winners that have won at the New South Wales Tourism Awards will actually progress through to the national awards. So TIC in New South Wales is actually part of the New South Wales Business Chamber, which is fantastic because we actually get access to a lot of support, and all of their departments. So that's a wonderful change that's happened in the last few years. And as part of that, particularly for those New South Wales Business Chamber members out there, the wonderful thing is that the entry to the awards for you is completely free. Now, for those of you who aren't New South Wales Business Chamber Awards, please do have a look at that. Particularly if you're entering a couple of categories, the amount of support and assistance that you receive, and if it's the first year that you're actually joining as a member, you'll actually receive free access to the accreditation program as well. The amount of support that you do receive for this is certainly worthwhile. So please do look at that as you make some decisions about the categories that you're entering. Now, I mentioned that if you're a winner at the New South Wales Tourism Awards, you will progress through to the national awards. Previously, some of you may be aware that you had also some regional awards. And one of the things that has happened is we've been given about $43 million to actually establish 6 regions. So there'll be some announcements. We've got some regional tourism organisations that have been established, and they're actually in procurement stage for those executive officers. So there will be announcements soon, no doubt about those in the latter half of this year. But the great thing is that those regional tourism awards are expected to recommence again next year. And so for many of you who are first-timers, you may not be aware the category questions that are actually at state level are the same questions that are actually asked at regional level as well. So, again, the process is that if you win at regional level, then you actually progress through to the state. So that's why we keep that consistency. And here's an example of some of those regions. Obviously it's a little hard to see the Sydney region has a couple of areas there, but this is an example of those regions that we do have. And again, these 6 new destination networks, as they're now called, there'll be some announcements coming your way shortly. But that gives you a bit of a visual from a geographical sense as to where they're going to be located. So what are some benefits of entering the awards? I know that some of you listening have entered the awards, and you've probably found that it's been such a valuable process to actually go through your business and review what you're doing. There's a lot of people that actually use this as a business planning process. Sydney Bridge Climb, for example, used this as a business planning process when they entered the awards consistently over a number of years, and they found that they actually received a lot of value. We've had an operator who was actually a gold winner at state last year, Ask Roz, who expressed to us in a workshop recently that, having undertaken this process also saved them thousands of dollars that it would normally have cost to get somebody in to actually help them work through these things. And you're going to notice when you, if you haven't already looked at the questions, when we go through some of those example questions in the later half of this webinar, that they are actually very much focused on business practices and how you're doing and what your performance is. So it's a really great time to stop and reflect. It's also fantastic to actually say, oh my gosh, wow, look at everything that we have done to date. We often don't get the chance to reflect back on our successful past year. We also, there's also obviously an opportunity to start benchmarking your business. So for some of you who haven't undertaken some of that benchmarking, you get to do that through the process. And, you actually get to look and think about what is your marketing strategy and who your competitors are and how you can actually increase your market share or increase the level of customer satisfaction or your customer service. So also you definitely get to raise the profile of your business. I know I have to say this, being a finalist is a really big thing. The judges, the amount of time and consideration we give to every single entrant and whether they're deserving of finalist status or not is as much consideration as we give to who is deserving of the placements, gold, silver, bronze. So being a finalist is a massive thing. I mean, even entering the awards process and letting people know this is like a continuous improvement process. So even letting people know, your customers know that you've entered the awards is a wonderful thing. So for those of you who've got some marketing campaigns, when we talk about the key dates, think about how you're actually marketing your business over the coming year and leverage that. Tell people you've entered the Tourism Awards. Tell people if you're a finalist. And, of course, you're going to tell people if you're a winner. But don't forget those first two as well. One of the fantastic things that you have access to through this program is free mentoring. So this is like a pre-assessment review, and you're going to have somebody who's a past judge who has experience in a range of different areas like marketing, business planning, development. They've run operations before, or they've consulted to the industry, actually doing an independent review, not only just of your responses, but they'll be giving you some suggestions and things to think about as they're going through your submission, things to think about for your business. And for those who do the mentoring, and it is free to all entrants, so we really strongly encourage you, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that a little later, but that's one independent review. So we also have 3 independent judges who are assessing your submission, and they're doing exactly the same thing. You know, we're very passionate about the industry. There are over 50 volunteer tourism judges, and we do it because we love the industry and we want to help you succeed. So that means that just simply by entering, you have 3 independent assessors looking at your business, giving you some thoughts, suggestions and tips, not just about how to respond to the questions, but about their thinking. You know, we've had numerous times people have said, oh, have you actually thought of this as an opportunity? And you can see here that this is the media exposure that you will gain as part of being part of the awards program. So definitely, you know, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. We've got Qantas In-Flight Magazine, Tourism in Touch, Escapes newsletter, and the Sydney Weekender. So again, some other really great reasons for entering, and of course, as Ken is also sharing with us, the star ratings are also free as well, which is true. Thank you, Ken, for reminding me of that. So obviously, you know, if anyone's doing a program and they're wondering, you know, they might be doing a TV program such as Sydney Weekender, they're heading out to Broken Hill, or they might be writing up a, you know, 4-page article in the Sydney Morning Herald on New South Wales destinations. Of course, they're going to come and see us and ask us, you know, who are the winners of the awards, who are the finalists, who should we go out and see. So we are the go-to for journalists and for media. So again, that's another great reason for entering the awards. So let's look at some key dates. So get your pen ready. These are some really critical key dates that really do need to be met. Nominations, obviously, they're open now. We also have our mentoring program, which is open now as well. So for anyone who hasn't yet indicated or completed their expression of interest, please do so and indicate that you are wanting to receive mentoring. For those of you maybe who have already completed an expression of interest and you want to do the mentoring but you weren't aware or didn't see that at the time, it's obviously not too late to tell us that you want to do mentoring. And you know, look, please, you know, feel free to pop that in the chat box as we're going through. Heidi from the awards program is right here with me, or you will get her details, so you can. I've got her email address for you, so of course you can send her an email at a later date. The nominations close on the 14th of July, which is actually, what's today's date? Today's June. What am I saying? It's June. Don't panic, everyone. You've still got 1 more month. That's 4 more weeks. So 4 more weeks to actually complete your nomination. So simply that's just saying that we're nominating for the awards program, and it's just like a registration process. So it's not the submission itself. You just need to let us know that you're wanting to enter. And then we ask that all of those who are actually in the mentoring program, the date that your draft submissions close is the 17th of July. Now, when we say draft submissions, we have had this question in a couple of workshops. A couple have asked, you know, how draft does it need to be? Well, actually, it needs to be, to get the most from this process, it actually needs to be as completed as you would have it if you were to actually submit it. So, you know, it's that final draft. I'm happy with it. This is what it would look like for me to actually submit it. So that's due on the 17th of July, which is about another 5 weeks. So Yeah, definitely early the better, as Heidi's, you may have heard Heidi say that. So the earlier the better is definitely the what we're looking at, because the earlier that you submit it, the earlier you're going to receive your feedback, which means that you've got more time to adjust that. So the final day that you'll receive the feedback, for those of you who, we will basically, as soon as it's been your draft submission for the mentoring program's been submitted, it will be sent off to one of our mentors, and it will be starting to be reviewed straight away, and you'll receive it back. So the later it is, the later you'll get your feedback, but the very last date of feedback is going to be the 24th of July, which means it gives you a week to then have a look at that feedback and review your submission, make some changes and amendments and improvements, and then the very, very, very last day that you can submit your entry to the New South Wales Tourism Award is the 31st of July. So for those of you who aren't taking advantage of the mentoring program, and please do so, one of the reasons that we put the mentoring program in place is because we want you, our winners, to really not only just shine, but to really have that opportunity to strategically think about what you're doing in your business, and how how you're thinking about your marketing and how you're improving your business. But also, when we get to nationals, we want to basically make New South Wales the winning state as much as possible above all states. So we're not very competitive, are we? No. So that's something that we really do want you to take advantage of, that mentoring. But if you don't, then you've got until the 31st of July to get your submission in. So we have site verifications from July to September. Now, I'm going to talk about site verifications in a moment and what's involved in those site verifications. Finalists are then announced on the 4th of October. Now, I mentioned this earlier, if you're thinking about a marketing program, as soon as you submit and your entry, you can start telling people that you've entered the awards. And for those finalists that have been announced, of course, that 4th of October to the 16th of November that's where it's really, really beneficial. Change your email signatures, really promote, tell people on social media, really promote the fact that you're a finalist. And our wonderful gala event, which is at the International Convention Centre this year, is going to be held on the 16th of November. So some really key dates to keep in mind, and of course these are all on the website, and you will have access to the slides as well. So let's have a look at what's new in 2017. So there has been some changes. One of the things that some of you already know is that we have a new online portal. Generally happens every couple of years for those first-timers. So we have a new online portal that actually that everybody is using. As you can see there, it's coming from our National Australian Tourism Awards program, and all of our states are actually using the portal. So if you're a new user, you will need to sign up. So for some of you who have had your old passwords, your old email addresses, you will no longer be able to use those. This is a completely new system, so no information from previous years has been retained. One of the great things that the new online portal means is that it is actually text-based responses. So in previous years, for those of you who have entered before, we used a PDF format. So you would actually develop, oops, sorry, that's jumped, I don't know why. Go back to that slide. So you would actually develop your entry, and you would actually design it, and the PDF would be then uploaded with some images. Well, the great thing is, because I know some of you did pay some graphic designers to design and make the PDF stand out, but the great thing is that you no longer have that expense. So, and it really has leveled the playing field, because it is actually about the content and what you're responding to and the information you're actually giving us in response to those questions. And what this also means is that there are formatting rules that no longer apply. So, for example, you were asked to do 1.5 line spacing. That's no longer applicable. For those of you who are very concerned about that, you don't even have to worry about that anymore. You won't lose points for any of those formatting rules. What we do have though is we do have word limits. So this is word limits right across all of the questions. This is like a total word limit, 12,500 words to respond to each question. For those of you listening who are wanting to enter into food tourism, there's a maximum of 8,000 word limit. So that's just a separate one. Of course, there's less questions there, so the 8,000 word limit should do you fine. So one of the questions that some of you might have is, well, how might I, and I'm going to use this word, spend your words. How will you actually decide how to spend your words? So just a reminder, the 12,500 word limit, as it says on the screen, is to respond to all questions. So if you have 18 questions, then your response in total to those 18 questions must be no more than 12,500 words. So here's some things to consider. You're going to look in the second part of the session, and I will repeat this in the second part of the session just in case we get anybody new that comes in. But there are some things to consider. First of all is how many questions are there? So you may actually have 18 questions. But then there are actually questions that have multiple parts to them. We're going to explore this in the second part of this webinar. Those multiple parts to the question might actually mean that you have roughly around 22 questions. So what you would do is you would then, to get an average word limit per question, you would divide the 12,500 by the 22 questions. And what that actually gives you is an average word limit of 568 words per question, if you like, per part of the question. Now, some questions are worth a lot more than others. So we've got some questions that are worth 4 points and others that are worth 7 points. So that's another thing that I want you to keep in mind. Obviously, the questions that are worth 4 points, you still need to address the question and provide the content, but what you actually also need to think about is that the questions that are worth 7 points are likely to need more information. So if an average of 568 words per question is what we have, you might say, as a guide, the questions that are worth 4, I might give maybe 450 words to those questions and see how I go with that. And the questions that are worth 7, I might use the extra 100 words or so on those questions. So that's just giving you, I guess, a bit of a logical process as to how to think about this. I write grants and tenders as well as sit on assessment panels and award submissions. So this is something that I use as a process to say, how might I average those word limits per question? So I'll repeat that again in the second part of the webinar after 12 o'clock when we get into that. But that gives you a little bit of an understanding. And there are also some amendments as well to specialist tourism services category. So there are conditions that have been amended there. So if you're considering specialised tourism, make sure that you check the category eligibility requirements. Now, let's talk about images. Each entry can include up to 25 images to assist you with responding to those questions. The great thing here is that your images can actually include infographics, and infographics, as many of us know, actually include a range of data and a range of statistics. So for those of you who haven't ever seen an infographic, just go to Google Images and have a look and you'll see what that looks like. Look, one of a great source to actually develop infographics, there's infographic generators that are free. You can certainly Google that. But there's also another program that's an Australian program which is called Canva. To spell that word, it's C-A-N-V-A. So Canva. So that's also a great resource. So if you're wanting to use a range of statistics to help visually support the key messages that you're trying to get across in a question, you could actually use those infographics and to visually present them. And of course, graphs, pictures and images. So they must be in JPEG format, and the system will actually address and, so if you actually upload a file format that's large, it'll actually readjust that automatically so that we have it in a file format a size, I should say. It'll, if it's over a meg, for example, it'll reduce it, but it must be in JPEG format. So one of the things to think about with those images, though, is the file name and the caption. So one of the things that you really should do is look at the images that are being loaded up. And if you're providing, let's just say, a hero image to the first question, which asks you to talk about your business, then that file image name, don't make it a series of weird numbers or letters. Actually state, for example, business image question 1. So use that as an indicator for the judge that that is actually to support my response to question 1. And then you could actually use the caption to expand on that. If you're wanting to use some infographics or graphs, you might actually use a file name which might be key visitor increase data, and the caption might be demonstrating 90% visitation increase, for example. That's a huge increase, but for example. So just think about that file name and that caption. Now tables, we definitely have tables. So some of you that have entered previously are used to actually being able to put tables in your Word document before you can actually PDF it. So we can actually include tables, and the simply for some of you, maybe you haven't had exposure to text boxes before. All it is simply a text box format, and what you can actually do with the text box format is that you'll actually see a little visual which looks like a table. You'll click on that and you'll be able to actually insert a table into the question. Now there are definitely some questions, and I'm going to cover these in the second part of the webinar starting at 12 o'clock. There are actually some questions that really lend themselves more easily, and what I mean by easily is they're easier to read and understand the logic. So there are definitely some questions that you would consider answering as a table format. So I'll talk about those a little later. So just a quick question before we move on about images. David's got a question. How should captions be incorporated into the image file? So David, when you load up, and for everybody else, when you actually load up the image, you'll be asked to give a caption. So that's how you'll actually incorporate it. You will change the file name before you load it up, and then you'll be asked for the caption. So that's when you'll actually type the caption. So with our tables, the tables, if you're a really great ways to spend your words wisely, because they're generally dot points. So that actually makes your response a lot more succinct. You don't have to necessarily pad it out with a sentence. It's just quite clearly, here's the response. One of the things to keep in mind is that the tables are simply text tables. So you can't include images, you can't include any graphs or anything along those in tables. Anything to do with images will be loaded up separately via the images, which is what we talked about in the last slide. These are simply text-based tables. Now, those words will actually be part of your total word count. So if you use 200, if let's just say that you're at 8,000 words as a total word count to date, and you've put in a table and that's used to 200 words. Of course, your total word count is then going to be 8,200. So anything to do with text-based responses, and I'm just going to clarify, Cherie's got a question about, are numbers in tables counted as words? Definitely. Numbers, anything where a word is basically anything with a space in between it. So even if you use a percentage, if you've got a, let's just say 20% and you put 20 space percent mark, let's just say 20% and you put 20 space percent mark, space, you've actually used two words. So numbers and words, characters are all included as part of word count. When systems like this look at words, that's what they look at. They look at things that separate. They don't actually count the number of characters. They only count the number of words, and the only way to identify the number of words are by the use of spaces in between words. Okay, so looks like there's no other questions on table, so let's move on. We're just going to have a look at some category descriptors. There has been a change to the Qantas Award for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Tourism. So for those of you that are considering it, and if you know of anybody who's suitable for this category, please encourage them to enter. So there has been some changes to that. So just make sure, look, if you are a previous entry or entrant, I should say, and you are looking at this category, there are also some question changes I'll cover for a couple of other categories as well. Make sure you double check your entry. What you don't want to do is copy and paste a response from last year when things like the questions and things like the category descriptions have actually been changed. All right, let's look at the rules of entry. One of the big things that some of you already know is that we're very, very strict on what we call a qualifying period. Now, a qualifying period means that anything that you're telling us and sharing with us in your submission has to actually be between the 1st of July 2016 to the 30th of June 2017. So when we're actually sitting there and we're marking and assessing your response, what we're giving you marks for and what we're telling you and commenting about and considering is all of the things that you've achieved in that period. There is only one exception to the rule, or maybe let's say two. The first of that is that there's one question that actually asks you for a history of your business, and we'll talk about this in the latter part, in the second part of the webinar. But that question, of course, you need to tell us about the history. So that means that you're going to be telling us about stuff before the 1st of July 2016, and that is completely acceptable. You've been asked for that information. But the only, the second one, which would be acceptable, is if you need to tell us something, to give us some context. And I'll give you an example. If we were starting, if we're talking to a marketing question and we want to share these, great results that we've had because we've just started, or we launched a new social media campaign, whatever it might be, and we need to tell you about the results between the 1st of July 2016 and the 30th of June 2017. But I need to, as I'm writing it, I need to give you a little bit of context so that you understand that we actually started the campaign in May, and these are the things that we did. That's fine. That's completely fine to set the scene if it is irrelevant. And I'll talk about relevance and really making sure that you're giving us relevant information pertinent to the question that adds value to your response. But you wouldn't tell us about any results from May to the the 30th of June 2016 because we can't give you any marks for that. So don't waste your words. It's perfectly okay to give us a little bit of lead up, but really focus on sharing those results for that period. And look, it's so unfortunate. I have, as a judge, and I have other judges, being, a lead judge, I see other judges' responses, and I talk to other judges, and it's so unfortunate that we have had a few entrants that have received comments saying, unfortunately, we couldn't give you as many marks as we would have loved to, because you most of the response to this question was talking outside the qualifying period. So it's such an important thing that I know I'm spending a bit of time on telling you, but really, really important, because you definitely will lose marks if you tell us about anything outside of those, except for those 2 examples I gave you. So you must have also traded for the entire qualifying period. Of course, we do have exceptions to the rule, as you would expect, because we have seasonal tourism activities, festivals, and of course marketing campaigns and new tourism businesses. So if you fit into one of those categories, again, just go back and make sure those category descriptors and the rules for those are actually met. So talking of categories, some of you may be very, very definite. You've already decided the category that you're going to enter. That's wonderful, but some of you may be thinking, oh, I'm not quite sure where I fit. Well, you have a range of categories that you can look at. So, for example, if you're in accommodation, you could potentially, particularly if you're a new accommodation business, potentially you could actually enter 7 categories, so categories 18 to 24. If you're a tour and transport operator, you could enter either 11 or 12. And what's going to help you decide what category you should enter is, firstly, actually going online, having a look at the category descriptors. So actually having a look at how the descriptor gives you some understanding of how that relates to your business. And this is important because the very first question you're asked is to actually tell us how you align in terms of your eligibility for the category. So some of you might look at the category descriptor and you're going to say, oh, look, that's really, really clear. I actually know what category that I should enter. Others might think, I'm still not quite sure. That's perfectly understandable, particularly if you are a first-time entrant. Please give us a call. Touch base with Heidi. We will help you, and we'll help you determine what category best suits your business. So if you are emailing us, just email us with a description of how you would classify your business. And, you know, it's also probably useful as well if you have any accreditation, to tell us what your accreditation is. And I'll give you an example. Someone at a workshop using accommodation, someone at a workshop was tossing up between standard and hosted. However, and they were leaning more towards hosted, and when we talked about their accreditation process, they were actually accredited as hosted. So it's like, well, actually that one best suits your business, and that's where they wanted, and the majority of their business was coming from, and that's where they wanted their business to focus on. So, you know, it's thinking about those kinds of things that might also help you clarify what category you should enter. So just a note here, we have 2 categories, which are the last 2 categories, Category 26 and Category 27, and these are the New South Wales categories only. So we feel that these 2 particular categories are so important that we wanted to have these in the awards program. What that means, though, for those people that are thinking about entering in those categories is that you can't, if you do win, you don't actually proceed to the National Awards program. So that is unfortunate, but the National Awards program doesn't have those categories included. But, you know, as I said, I'm sure you can understand why we thought it was so important for those to be included. All right, let's look at the rules of entry. So this in terms of the categories, this is the website to go to. This is where you'll find all of the categories listed. You'll be able to download them and you'll be able to actually have a look at them. So a note here for some of you that are considering multiple entries, and we love multiple entries. You know, make the most of it. You'd actually be surprised if you haven't actually entered multiple categories before. And look, we don't shy away from the fact that this really is an investment of your time. You know, for some it might take a week to do a category to a week and a half. If you're entering a second category, the amount of time that you take, particularly if it's for exactly the same product, is halved at least. Because a lot of the similar responses you've actually used for one category, you'll actually be able to use those responses in a second category. Of course, you need to tweak your responses to make sure that they're very specific to the questions that are being asked, but you can certainly enter 2 categories. There are, of course, some requirements around entering multiple categories, and you'll see there is a slide, and I'll refer to that when we move through. But for example, in tour and transport, well, you're either a major tour and transport or you're a tour and transport. For events and festivals, you're either a major or you're an event or festival. And accommodation, you can only enter once. There's a couple of examples, and I'll point the others as we go through. Oh, look, there it is, right there. Nice little segue. So, as you can see, attractions, festivals and events, tour and transport operators, accommodation, and the other biggest one is specialised tourism services. So specialised tourism services, if you haven't heard about this category before, it's kind of like a unique category because there are so many businesses out there that don't quite fit into other areas. And I'll give you an example. You might be an app like our Gold Award winner Ask Roz, a digital product. So there is actually no digital product category. So of course you would enter specialised tourism services. Specialised tourism, another one, and for those of you who have been involved in the awards program for many years will know that there was a product, or is a product I should say, in regional New South Wales called 2828, which is a group of volunteers who have actually started up a cafe and an event venue, and they entered and won Hall of Fame for specialised tourism services because it just didn't quite fit with events and festivals, and it just didn't quite fit with attractions. So it's those kinds of products that just don't neatly fit into other categories. So the important thing to know, and this is new for 2017, is that you're not permitted to enter any other additional categories. So it's really for those entrants that are unable to meet criteria of other categories. All right, let's have a look at the awards entry process. Coming up on your screen now, you're going to see that we have a bit of a fancy slide which takes you through the steps and stages that are involved in the process. And I did refer to these when we looked at the key dates. So if we look at, obviously we complete our registration and nomination, you download the category questions, you start having a look at those. You, of course, attend a workshop, and I know some of you have attended a workshop that are online or listening to the recorded session, and today's webinar. You register for mentoring support at any point along the journey. And again, for those wanting to be wanting to get feedback, so a pre-submission assessment, make sure that you're registered for mentoring and that your draft is submitted no later than the 17th of July. And you'll get that back no later than the 24th of July, and of course the final submission due into the portal by the 31st of July. Now look, I just want to make a comment actually when we're talking about online systems and portals, particularly if you're based in regional New South Wales or if you're travelling, please don't leave it to the last minute. You're not going to be able to use the system crashed because I didn't give it enough time excuse. Make sure that you give enough time to submit your entry through the portal. So look, when I'm actually doing submissions, and this is also so you don't stress out too much because look, it's a stressful process. Deadlines always are. So make sure that you give it an adequate time. Look, when I'm doing it, I say 48 hours before. because if something does happen, you want to make sure that you can fix it up. One of the things that we're really recommending strongly in the portal is that you actually do download the questions, and particularly again for those where the internet might be a little bit hit and miss, actually respond to the questions offline. The other valid reason for doing that for everyone is that you can actually see the when you're looking at a Word document, all your responses and the questions there, but when you're looking at an online portal, you're actually needing to progress through different pages to actually look at your responses. So respond to it offline. That's also really useful because, Microsoft Word's going to let you know how your word count's going. And you'll be able to develop your tables, and you'll be able to put your images in the Word document kind of where you want them. So what that means is when you're loading up your images, you can actually use the Word document as a bit of a checklist to make sure, oh yes, I've got that image for question 1, I've got that. So that's also a useful process. The other valuable thing is that you can cut and paste. So you can cut from Word into the text box. Just make sure though that it hasn't lost any formatting. So you may need to go back and include your formatting. So just make sure that you're getting that. And we're just waiting on the tables being cut and pasted. So we did have a question in our workshop. We're just waiting on a response from the National Committee, but we will certainly be sure to send this out to every single entrant about whether tables in a Word document can actually be cut and pasted into the text response as it is. Great. So, yeah, excellent. So Heidi's just letting me know that it has definitely worked. She's tested it. Fantastic. Thank you, Heidi, for her. So for her, it definitely did work. So what you may want to do is test that for your system to make sure it's working for you. So it certainly from our end is working. So that's great. What that means is your Word document, you'll be able to do your text response, you'll be able to put your tables in, and you'll be able to cut and paste those across. Word's also helpful, of course, because if you've got multiple people doing the document, you can use an online system that is actually, doing entry, or you could use markup as well. So that's also the benefit of using Word or a word processor to do that. All right, so some of you I know have gone through this process, but some of you haven't. So how do you actually register? Here it all is. Here are the steps and stages to register. Visit the online portal. There's the web address there. You'll create a new user account. So remember I said your old passwords, your email addresses, etc. don't work. It's a completely new portal. You're then going to get a verification email. You'll enter further business details. You'll register your nomination, and if you're not a member of the Chamber, you'll then complete payment. And then you can continue to make further nominations if you're entering more than one. So what does it look like if you haven't been on the portal? Here it is here. This is a bit of a screenshot for you. And we can see that, when we've got the key dates there. I mentioned that you've got access to them online. You can see that they're up on the screen. For some of you might have to squint a little bit. You don't want to be reading the dates on my screen. Go to that web address and you'll see the dates. And here it is here. Now I'm just going to point to this, and just going to use a red pointer here. If you can see this dot on the map right next to, pardon me, went one little slide too far. You can see this red dot on the map where it says, there's a green box and it says new user. Sign up here. So that's where you would actually enter your new user details. So you've got to click on that and you've got to enter your details. Once you've gone through that process and you've registered, you'll then get this screen, and you'll actually receive, or you'll actually have the ability to nominate now. So again, I'm just going to use this little red pointer to highlight those areas. So you can see that Nominate Now button there, and that's where you actually nominate for those categories. The other thing that I'm also going to point out is the user guide. This is really valuable. This user guide is actually a user guide for the online portal. So please download it, have a look at it. Now, just a note, just in case we've got anyone that's listening that's already done this, and look, maybe it was a week or so ago, please go back on and download that user guide. We have had some updates or updates to the user guide, so please make sure you've got the most up-to-date copy if you have any questions. So if you've got any questions about how do I do this, how do I do that, how do I enter a table, etc., it's all in the user guide, so please have a look there first. And if you're still having any issues, if you're still having any issues, one of the things to check is you should delete any browser history and try again. That does help. The other thing is maybe check it on a different computer, and if you're still having problems, give us a call and we'll see if we can help you. But recognising that some computer systems, there might be some differences. So just use those processes to make sure that you're okay. And as I say, all else fails, give us a call and we'll try and help you out. So once you've submitted your nominations, you're actually going to see those on the screen, and you can see here, again I'm going to use this red dot, you can see here there's a tab called nominations. So, and here's a list of all of your nominations that you've actually entered. Now what actually happens, if I'm going to come back over to the status, again the red dot, have a look at where the red dot is, you're actually going to see a status column. Now you can see here that we've got some green ones that are approved. So what happens when you submit is the coordinator then needs to approve your nomination. As soon as that's approved, you can then start going through and addressing the questions and beginning your award submission. Now, again, another note, there are nomination close dates, so you've really got to start doing that very soon if you haven't already done so. And when you're going through and having a look at your questions and whether it's online, you're starting to respond to it online, whether you've actually done as we've suggested it and put it in a Word format and you're actually loading that up, one of the things that the system will not allow you to do is to move on. So if you've missed anything, and that's what I mean, like if you've missed ticking a box, if you've missed entering a response to a question, the system's going to let you know. So thank goodness for that. You won't lose any points because, there have been people that have missed questions. So because they've, obviously it's been lost in their transfer process, human error. But the good thing is that that's not going to happen to you because the system's not going to allow you to miss a question. So if you see this red box, it means that there's something that's not complete. So you've got to go back. You've got to make sure that you've got all of those, boxes ticked and sections completed and questions answered. So just make sure that you do that. All right, so we talked about image files and we talked about the fact that they need to be in JPEG format, that you've got a maximum of 25 and that the system will actually adjust. So this is how you would load an image. Now I'm sure many of you have done this online and it looks very, very, very familiar. You simply go to this button, again look for the red dot, which says select files, and it'll actually come up with, where do you want the files to be loaded up from? Is it your document? Is it a particular folder that you actually have? So you'll select your files and you'll actually upload those. Now, there is actually, for those of you who are a little bit more tech savvy, and you know how to actually change the DPI and change the, which is the resolution, and change the size of the files. You can see here where the red dot is. There's actually some guidance around that. The other thing is that we ask that files be no bigger than 1 meg. If you have the ability to change that, look, for some of you recognizing that you may not have those skills, and that's perfectly okay. The system will actually adjust that automatically for us, which is great. That's an improvement they've made to the system with some feedback, so that'll actually be adjusted. But make sure it's in JPEG format, and no less than 72 DPI. For real clarity, 300 DPI is great because it really makes things crystal clear. So something to think about there. All right, so when you have actually finalised your entry and you're satisfied, to the best of your ability, you've included that mental feedback, you've attached all of the supporting files and images, etc. You can then finalise your entry by clicking the submit button, which is in the bottom right-hand corner. And we talked about the user guide. Again, this is just reminding you that the user guide is there if you have any technical issues, so you know where to find that. Let's now talk about submission judging. So I know a lot of you actually have questions, and it's really useful to ask these questions about how is it judged. So how are our the process for judges? How are they brought on? Who are they? What does that look like? So we're about to go through what this process is and what that looks like. One of the key things I wanted to share with you is that we have, with all of our judges, they're looking for particular things. And the number one reasons that submissions lose points is that the judges just don't get the information they need. And look, I know that we're going to be talking about this and expanding on this in the latter part of the webinar, which starts again at 12 o'clock. But I also recognise that some of you may not be able to make that, so I really do want to impress this upon you, that it's really important that you do these things. And if you can't make the second part of the webinar, it is so important that you listen to the recorded session. There are so many tips, so many tricks that we're going to share, so many ways that we're going to share about how to actually logically address a question, etc. So these are a summary, I guess, of what we would consider that we need to see as a judge and why you might actually lose points. Whilst we don't have those formatting rules where you're going to lose points, these are certainly reasons that you would lose points. Judges, we don't get the information they need. That means you haven't responded to the question at all, so it's not addressed. And what I mean by that is you might think that you've actually given a response, but the response that you've provided, it just has kind of rambled onto another tangent. The response that you've provided, it just has kind of rambled onto another tangent. So it actually isn't, the information in the response is not directly relevant to the question that's been asked. So of course, we're not going to give you any points for that if we're getting a response that's just, really not responding to the questions being asked. You may get a few points if you've started off telling us, but then if you've gone off on another tangent, then only a few points is going to be likely. And if that's a 7-point question and you're only getting 1 point, or, well, let's be kind, say 2 points, you've just lost 5 points. That's a huge amount of points. The thing that tells the judge, though, particularly if it's the first question, is that that's likely to be the case right throughout your whole submission. And in many cases, we find that those that aren't responding to the question directly, that's exactly what we find right through the whole submission, is they're not responding to the questions, every single question asked. So they're only getting a few points per response, unfortunately. The other one is that some components of the question's not addressed. So what that means, and I'm going to be talking about this in the second part of the webinar, and I'm going to show you a little formula that's actually going to help you think through how to analyze questions, how to break them up. And what often happens is that there's a lot of questions that have 2 parts or more parts to a question. So that means that it might be the same subject. So for example, there's a question about what are your products, services and experiences. Well, the subject is your business, but there's actually 3 parts, 3 different areas of the question. So you actually need to make sure that you address those as relevant to your business. And the other thing is that you will look for the word "and". So there's questions that have "and". Well, that means that that question has 2 parts. So that means that you actually need to provide responses to one part of the question that might differ, so the angle, in other words, might change for the second part of the question. And I'll just give you one example while we're talking about it. We will look at that, as I said, at 12 o'clock. Describe any innovations that have taken place during the qualifying period to improve your tourism business, and demonstrate how these innovations enhance your experiences and services. So, of course, the first part of the question is talking about innovations that improve your business. That's the angle, right? But the second part of the question asks you about how they've enhanced your experiences and services. So can you see what I mean by that there are two parts to the question? And unfortunately, if you've only answered one part of the question, and that question's worth 7 points, the maximum amount of points that you can get is 3.5. And it would want to be an exceptionally strong response to that one part of the question to get a full 3.5 marks. So you really need to really make sure that when you look at the question, and as I said, I'm going to give you this formula when we come back at 12. So make sure some of those components are addressed, or sorry, all of those components are addressed. The other thing that doesn't help you win points, so, you know, is a weaker submission. What I mean by that is that you don't provide supporting facts or statistics or evidence. And really, those supporting facts, stats and evidence actually help strengthen a response. So it's really important that you don't just use throwaway statements like, we're the best. You know, okay, well, why are you the best? Why are your, you know, our customers are satisfied? Well, how are they satisfied? We've improved or increased our visitation. Well, by what percentage? How many numbers, etc. So you've got to make sure that you do that. And the other one is that they can't understand what you're trying to say. So it's confusing, it's illogical, it's not well presented. So it's not easy to read, and it's really easy to see those. It's also very easy to see ones that have quickly been chucked together because you're running out of time. So you just quickly, oh my gosh, I'll just quickly respond and get this submission in. Because you really, you know, unfortunately, because you don't have time to stop and analyse the questions, you really do miss key points. So we're going to be sharing more of that detail in the second part, but I wanted to talk to this right now, because if we're talking about judging, this is really what is going to lose you points. When we talk about the judges and what they're looking for submissions that don't look like this. All right, so when we look at our judges, this is the process. We have, for every single category, and what was there, 27 categories? That's why we have over 50 judges. For every single category, there is a panel of 3 judges. So that's 3 independent judges that are actually independently, so we don't come together and collaborate. And the first thing that we do is we look at the submission that you've put in, and we do that within our own environment, wherever that is, and we do that independently. And we actually go through and we spend a bit of time. I mean, you know, our judges, I told you how passionate they are, and they, you know, we love the industry and we want to help you guys succeed. And you know, certainly if we can help you think about your business and improve your business, you know, that really satisfies us. And one of the things that our judges ensure that they do is they give the appropriate amount of time to actually really sit with your submission. And, you know, for us, it's not a tick and flick exercise. For us, it's actually a really well-considered assessment. And that means that in some cases, we're giving, for every single submission, up to 2 hours to actually go through and assess it. Some submissions don't require as much. Some could be done in 3/4 of an hour to an hour and a half. But we really do make sure that we give the time. You know, when we nominate as a judge and say, yep, that's fine, I know that some of you might think, and I have had this question before, so I'm going to address it. Some of you may think with volunteers, it's who's available. Well, not with our judges, I can assure you. We actually go through an expression of interest process, so you actually have to be at a certain level before you'll be accepted as a judge. And this is an industry awards program. We've got a lot of due diligence around this, and importantly, we're using people that have the knowledge to be able to provide the feedback so that we can not just help you and your business, but actually advance you to nationals so we can knock every other state off the podium. There's a competitiveness coming out in me again. So you've got independently 3 judges look at your submission. Then the independent auditor, so as part of our due diligence process, we have an independent auditor that's actually appointed. And what they do is they actually correlate the results. And, of course, they're looking for things that perhaps are slightly unusual. And I'll give you an example. It's not saying that this is the case, but it just kind of gives you a bit of an example. Let's just say that I marked everyone in a category exceptionally high, exceptionally low, but one particular entrant I might have marked exceptionally high. And, it's not consistent with how other judges have marked it either. So, of course, that's an anomaly, isn't it? So an auditor is going to say, well, hang on, something's not quite right here. We need to find out why, what's happened. So these are things that we do as part of an extremely robust due diligence process. Now, I'm going to talk about confidentiality and conflicts of interest in a moment, but I can assure you that due diligence process around that happens as well. So then the next process is that the lead judge has a discussion with the other judges around the entrance, and we get to have some of that robust discussion. And believe you me, and I mentioned this earlier, we invest as much time into entrants that are deserving of finalist status as we do of entrants that are deserving of award status. We can have some pretty passionate discussions, I can assure you. And when we're reading your submission, this is one thing that as judges we love to see is your passion for your business, your passion for what you're doing, how you're actually contributing to the success of your business and the success of the local tourism industry in your community. These are all kind of questions that are asked along the way, and you actually build a bit of a fan in us. So, we certainly do advocate, and we have some pretty passionate discussions ourselves. So it's really robust process, and then, at some point we come to an agreement. Now, this has happened. There have been some times where the judges have not been able to agree, and what does happen then is that we bring in other judges. So we bring in other judges to give an independent review of that category. So that means that other judges must go through and remark the category. And yeah, it certainly, that situation has happened in the 10 years I've been involved. So that's the process. Now, I mentioned that we have a lot of due diligence and that we sign confidentiality agreements, and that we are required to declare any conflicts of interest. So we are required to do that. And the confidentiality agreements, we also receive a list of entrants, and we have to make sure that we have absolutely no perceived or actual direct conflicts of interest. So that's something that that we do consider. And certainly when I ran an event company, I used to also run the Inland Tourism Awards, as some of you may remember. We needed to make sure that there was no clashes of conflict with my supply chain. So that's definitely something that is really well considered. All right, I'm just going to, before I talk about the site verifications, I just wanted to make sure, Heidi's just verified something for me, and I just want to make sure, because certainly we will have people that are going to be listening to the recorded session, that you capture this information as well. So we've talked about mentoring quite a lot, and I hope you've got the message. You've definitely got to enter our mentoring program. But for those that are entering our mentoring program, you won't actually submit your entry using the online portal. The online portal is simply for the absolute final submission. If you're listening and you came to a previous workshop in the last week, yes, that has been a new change. And Heidi will, of course, notify all of our workshop participants of this change. So those of you who are nominating for mentoring, just send Heidi, and you'll get Heidi's email shortly, just send Heidi an email Word document. So then we will actually then forward that onto the mentors, and they'll put their comments into that Word document and then forward that back. And actually, you know, that's also really great, because what's fabulous about that is they'll actually make comments and track changes. So you will know specifically, if they're highlighting an area within your response, you'll know specifically what part their comment refers to. So that's actually a great change, I have to say. All right, so I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that. Now let's talk about site verifications. Pardon me while I just need to clear my throat and grab a drink. Hang on just a second. And I'm back. That was very quick. I know I didn't want a lot of dead air time. How long have I been talking to? Full stop. Just over an hour. All right, thank you for giving me a moment. So let's talk about site verifications. Now, site verifications, we don't ask you for evidence. So we don't actually ask you to upload, for example, your financials, or upload your marketing plan, or upload your risk management plan. And the reason that we don't ask for that is because we do site verification. So this means, except for destination marketing and the individual category, every other category has a site visit from one of our wonderful volunteer judges. So they actually come out to you. And I know some of you have had site verification visits before. So for our newbies, it is not scary at all. Basically, it actually really gives you an opportunity to share your business with them. So as a site verification judge, first of all, the time will be organised with you. So the time and date will be organised. The judge will contact you. So once you've entered, Heidi will actually allocate a judge to come out and visit you. Now, one of the important things to note here is that the judge that comes and visits you is not necessarily, and it generally isn't, I have to say, and why it's not the same judge that's going to judge your submission is because we allocate site judges based on geographical location. So you might have somebody, for example, that's based, if you're based in Sydney, the judge that actually assesses your submission is going to be in Byron Bay. And there's no way that the awards program can afford to fly that judge from Byron Bay to come and do a site visit. So what we're going to do is we're going to allocate a site visit judge that's as close as possible to where you are. So just keep that in mind. And why that's important is because the site verification judge who's coming out, they can see your submission, but they haven't spent as much time in your submission. They're not right across every single thing. So don't be surprised if they ask you a question and you think, oh, but I actually put that in the submission. That's okay. They're just simply asking you for a question. So really the site verification is about show and tell. Okay, so that means that if they ask you something about your business plan, grab your business plan, show them that. Take them on a site tour, show them the room. If you're an attraction, take them for a tour around the attraction. So as much as about giving them a bit of an experience, and please don't overdo it. It's not about, we don't expect a big buffet, or, we don't expect for it to be put on at all. So, just treat our site verification judges as you normally would another guest or a visitor to your site. But we really are there to actually cite documents that aren't able to be included in the submission. And again, we get qualitative feedback on the business. So the site verification judges have their own document that they have to complete. And that document considers, things like as they were driving up, how they, how they were treated in terms of customer service, if they phoned earlier. And they also have a look at the website and your digital footprint as well. So, what are the responses and reviews on TripAdvisor, for example? So they look at those things. So these are some of the things that a site verification judge is going to want to see. And here's a hot tip, and this tip has been reinforced by a number of entrants who have suggested exactly the same thing in workshops. As you're actually going through and as you're responding to the questions that have been asked, whatever the document is that you've gathered that information from, be it your policy manual, be it your risk management plan or your marketing plan, business plan, etc., save a copy of that document in a folder just for the site verification judge. And that way, because I'm assuming most of you will have digital files, if you have a physical file, that's fine. You don't need to feel like you have to print it out for the site judge at all. If you've got a digital file, that's wonderful. So that means that when the site verification judge comes, you're not rushing around going, oh my gosh, what is it that I've got to show them? And you've got everything there for them to view. Now, of course, in the email that comes out to you, you'll also receive this reminder about some of the things that we're going to want to see as a site verification judge. So I hope, Rhonda, I just noticed that you had a question. I hope, Rhonda, that answered your question about documents. Actually, no, your question's a slightly different one. So Rhonda had a question. What if you operate in an electronic environment with no physical office? Look, Rhonda, that's perfectly fine. I mean, I'm sure that maybe you've got a home-based office and that's where you actually operate from. So that would be the environment that we would come and attend. If you're, let's just say, a tour, then really it might be taking the judge on the tour and then catching up for coffee afterwards and having those documents or having that information at hand. So I hope that's answered your question, Rhonda. Let me know if it hasn't. But, and again, that's something that you can discuss in terms of what that looks like with a site verification judge. Wonderful. Now let's talk a little bit more about the mentoring and the entrance support. We've certainly mentioned it's free, and I can tell you if you're kind of on the fence about mentoring, we've been travelling around the state doing some workshops this last week and a half, and I have to say that oh gosh, it's a pretty high number. I reckon about 98%, Heidi. Yeah, even maybe more. So 98% minimum of people that have attended awards workshops are saying, oh yeah, we're signing up for mentoring, and we've taken their details and they're on our mentoring list. So if you're kind of sitting there thinking, yeah, I'm not sure, and look, even if you are an entrant, you've entered for a number of years, mentoring is also really valuable as well. But if you're kind of on the fence, think about all of those other people who are potentially in the same category that are going to go through mentoring. And of course, you want to make sure that you maximise your success. So, so really do get in quick. Just like our judges, our mentors have experience and knowledge. In many cases, they're actually past judges at regional, state and national level. They may have also judged in other awards programs, like me, Business Awards, Vanuatu Tourism Awards. They may be consultants. They've got backgrounds. They've run a tourism operation, they've owned an accommodation, they've been a marketing manager for a hotel company, they've been involved in event management, they have experience with submission writing, either writing and or assessing. So they are actually a wealth of experience. And again, just like our judges, we don't nominate our mentors lightly. We are trying to make this as robust as possible, and that's why we have essentially eligibility requirements even for our mentors and judges. So there's a lot of value that you're going to receive from these wonderful, wonderful volunteers who are very very well experienced. Now, look, we're about to finish the webinar, the first part of the webinar, which is stage 1. So if you've got any other questions, please do load those up right now. We've only got about a minute or two, so please type away. Of course, stage 2 starts at 12 o'clock. We're going to take about a 35, 40-minute break between that, so that's great. Time to grab a coffee and lunch. And that's going to be focused specifically on how to analyse a question and how to respond to the question, and some tips about making it easy for the judges. So as we've said there with mentoring, make sure that your response is in a word format. I said that earlier, and that'll be emailed through, and you can see Heidi's email there on the screen, and you'll email that through to Heidi. And look, there's Heidi's details as well as her phone number. Now, we've got a few questions coming in, so I'm going to refer to those questions and answer those. And again, if you've got some questions, please keep those coming. So let's have a look at Rhonda. Just give me a moment, everyone. Rhonda's saying, thanks, we've got all the documents online. I wanted to confirm the location as you run an event rather than a business. That's right, Rhonda. So hopefully that sounds like that's answered that question. So we've got another question from Sarah. How do I find out more information about the North Coast Regional Tourism Awards? So Sarah, the Regional Tourism Awards aren't running this year because of the change in what was the regional tourism organisations, now the new destination networks. And, you know, look, some of them, just to give you a bit of an update as to their status, I know some of them have been established, and they're actually on the procurement stage. They're actually starting to advertise or have applications have closed for a new CEO. So what we're going to see is we're going to see the notification about those regional awards, I would imagine, next year, early next year. Brenda, if you could give me a little bit of information about what you're asking, why you can't see the questions. If you can give me a little bit more information about that, and I can respond to that question. Jenny has a question about what is the cost of entering the awards program. Thanks very much, Jenny. Here is the cost. And I'll just break this down. So for a small business of less than 20 employees, so if you're a small business, less than 20 employees, listen up. If you're a member of the business chamber, it's free entry. So there's absolutely no cost to enter as a chamber member. If you're not a member of the New South Wales Business Chamber, perhaps you're a local Chamber of Commerce member. So we've actually got an alliance program as a local Chamber of Commerce, you know, with all of the local Chamber of Commerces around New South Wales. Well, some of them we've got an alliance program. So if you're actually a local Chamber member, it's only $231 as a Chamber member. So that means that, you know, straight away, gosh, for those of you who are local Chamber members, you're getting that benefit as well. And the other one is that if you are not a member at all, the non-member rate is $308, including GST, and that's for, again, just a reinforcement, that's for small businesses of less than 20 employees. Now, I'm just trying to find an email, and I'll come back to that, but my understanding is that the tourism industry package for a membership, and I'm going to qualify this, and we'll make sure that we get this to you, is around $297 from memory. So it does depend on, the membership does depend on the package, the type of your organisation, the size, etc. But I received an email from our wonderful Katie out at based out of Orange, the business chamber based out of Orange, and I'm pretty sure that's the figure. So I'm just going to find an email whilst we're going through. If it doesn't come through, we'll actually send you information on that package. So large businesses of more than 20 employees, again, if you're a member of the chamber, it's absolutely free. If you're a member of our local Chamber of Commerce Alliance program, it's $324.50, including GST. So again, that's if you're a member of a local chamber with the Alliance program. And as a non-member, it is $434.50, including GST. Forgive me, I can't find that email. We'll make sure that we send you out information for all the webinar attendees. You'll actually get a link so you can actually have a look at the membership packages. Okay, so I've got a few other questions. Let me go back through those. Okay. Linda, thanks very much. Glad you enjoyed the webinar so far, and look forward to seeing you at 12 again. Brenda, only 2 other questions visible from Jenny. And oh, okay. Don't worry about that, Brenda. That's fine. What Brenda's question is she's actually only seen 2 questions. Look, that's fine. I'm actually looking at the questions from mine, so we actually have a little box, so you don't need to worry about seeing any questions. You know, this is just simply for us, so don't worry about that. Not a problem. David, can you explain a little bit more about the qualifying period? If the question doesn't specifically mention it, would I lose marks by talking about ongoing initiatives commenced in previous years? Okay. All right, David, I'm going to address this question. Let's just go back and look at the qualifying period. I'm actually going to bring that up on the screen, so bear with me while I go through that, just so that you can all remember what the qualifying period is. All right, so it's really important that the qualifying period is addressed. Oh, I've gone too far here, haven't I? It's really important that the qualifying period is addressed in your questions. Now, I did mention the only difference to that is going to be the first question that asks you for a history of your business. I'm just highlighting that qualifying period there for you. So the first question asks you for a history of your business. It's perfectly okay, of course, we've asked you that question, give us a history of your business, not a problem at all. What David's question's relating to, though, is the second part of my explanation on this one, which is your question asks you to provide, and look, I'm going to bring up a sample question here just to give you a bit of understanding as to what this looks like. So I'm going to bring up a business planning question. Let me have a look. Here we go. No, that's a long one. Let's look for a short business planning question. Here we go. This is a good one. It's actually in the business planning section. It's question A, and it says, provide an overview of the key features of your business plan, including goals, strategies, and outcomes. So when we look at the qualifying period, what we want to know, and we'll talk about that question and other things about that question later on. All I'm doing is referring that question specifically to the qualifying period at the moment. What we want to know is we want to know what are the strategies, so what were your goals in your business plan? But specifically, what were the strategies and the outcomes within that qualifying period? Now, rightly so, as David said, there might be some ongoing initiatives that have commenced in previous years. So is it okay to talk about that? Would I lose marks? It's perfectly okay to provide us with context. So it's perfectly okay, for example, to say for the last 2 years we've run this campaign, and because we had such success, we've run it again. And what's really great if you've run something that has been run in previous years is you actually have that baseline data. So you know very well, I'll give you an example. If we were running a campaign to increase our length of stay, we know very well that on average our length of stay increased by half a night. So when we first started doing it, we increased our length of stay to 2 nights. And this was an initiative off the back of this marketing campaign. So We know then, in this qualifying period, the results for this campaign between the 1st of July and the 30th of June, and noting that for some of you it might be a package and that continues for the whole year. For some of you it might be a specific campaign that's only for a period of 12 weeks, for example. But regardless of that, where you spend your words and where you give us a lot of information has to be between that qualifying period. It's pointless telling us about results from your previous campaign or package in previous years. The only thing that you would share with us would be baseline data. So, for example, the 2016-2017, what did I use? I used length of stay, didn't I? 2016-2017 period, this campaign returned a result of increased length of stay from 1.5 in the previous year to 2.5 this financial year, this 2016-2017 period. So I hope that's answered your question, David. That's the only way that you would refer to something that was before the qualifying period in terms of context. Please don't waste your words giving us information and telling us about results of, expanding, I should say. A short summary is fine, but don't expand and waste your words on telling us about stuff that's prior to the 1st of July 2016, because you can't, it's not so much that you get marked down, it's just that you won't get the marks that your entry deserves if you focus too much attention on that. Just provide the context and then go into detail about the other. So hopefully that has addressed your question. I'm just having a look. I think that, Robin, you've asked a question. You're looking at entering the events category for an event that you hosted in New South Wales. But you're a business based in Queensland. Are you eligible? So my understanding is that you actually have to operate within the state to be able to enter the state awards. That's what I have been told. So what we're going to do though, Robin, we've got your details. Heidi's going to send you a separate email and she's going to help you with that and as to how you might actually still enter or potentially still be able to enter the awards. So Heidi's going to connect with you. She's got your details. That's not a problem at all. Is there? Oh, David, fantastic. Thanks for letting me know that answered your question. And looks like that's out of questions. So looks like everybody's asked the questions they need to, which is fantastic. I'm just going to bring up that last slide, which again is Heidi's details. So if you've got any questions at all, please give Heidi a call or shoot her an email. She's wonderful. She'll do whatever she can to help support you. And look, I look forward to seeing you all back in half an hour. We start again at 12 o'clock. Thanks very much, everyone.